everyone. Welcome to the second episode for the Filipino Australian Lawyers Association podcast series. This series aims to highlight the strong Filipino Australian lawyers and advocates that make up our community and showcase their expertise and emphasize the importance of Filipino Australian legal relations. Today, we are joined by our pioneering fellow members in the commercial legal space, Celia Torres-Villanueva and Jerome Martin, sharing their insights and experiences in cross-border commercial legal practices. So thank you, Jerome and Celia, for being our guests for this episode. For introduction, our first guest is Celia Torres-Villanueva. Celia is currently the head of legal of Moran Precision Engineering, a global supplier of precision engineered solutions to a range of industries, including aerospace and defense for predominantly blue chip companies such as Lockheed Martin and Boeing. Celia is backed by her portfolio of career in the Philippines and Australia as a dually qualified lawyer, academic, and former vice chancellor in the University of the Philippines, entrepreneur, and a strong advocate for the Filipino-Australian community, especially here in Melbourne. Our next guest is Jerome Martin. Jerome is currently a partner at Clayton Utz, a top-tier Australian commercial law firm with strong presence in the Asia-Pacific region. Jerome has strong expertise in real estate and is recognized as among the property industry's best emerging talent. Jerome is a strong advocate for the Filipino-Australian business community, legal and business community, supporting initiatives and collaboration that foster a prosperous Filipino-Australian commercial legal network. He is also a strong advocate for diversity initiatives and is a great example of strong Filipino talent in the field. So to start off our first section of the podcast, if we could start with Celia, could you share your journey to becoming a lawyer leading up to your current role right now?
Sure, yeah. Actually, I just wanted to clarify. So I'm actually head of legal of the ASDAM Group, which comprises of 6 companies, 5 Australian and 1 UK. And Moran is actually just one of the 5 Australian companies comprising the ASDAM Group. Yes, so no, that's okay. So well, I started out my career as a scientist. So I have a PhD in molecular genetics from the US before coming back to the Philippines, becoming an academic and scientist and becoming a lawyer in the Philippines. So because of that connection to the sciences and then going into law, my career transition sort of just organically went into intellectual property law and commercial and technology law. So when I came to Australia to become a lawyer here, my first jobs were really in the universities and in CSI role. And then, so that more of like commercial legal contracts, commercial management and IP in the research and technology space. But then when then I shifted to the private sector. And then I went into energy and defense, and now I'm working with 6 defense manufacturing, and they're called MROs. There are 2 sets of companies in our group. One set are the manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing for defense and also some commercial civil applications, and the other one is for MRO or maintenance, repair, and overhaul, which includes as well defense and civil applications. So yeah, that's my long career in a nutshell.
About this current role, could you share us more about your commercial experiences in Australia and the Philippines?
Sure, yeah. So in the Philippines, I was the head of I was executive director of the Intellectual Property Research and Training Institute for the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. So it's the government agency, but completely self-funded. So it doesn't rely on budget appropriations. I think that's still true, the IPO in the Philippines. So the commercial there was I helped draft the technology transfer bill, which became the Technology Transfer Act. So if I had stayed in the States with my PhD and a JD, I would have become, I would have been in the technology transfer career path. Here in Australia and even in the Philippines, there's no real technology transfer career path the way there is in the States. So in the States, you're expected to have all 3. You're expected to have a PhD in the sciences, a JD, and an MBA. I don't have an MBA. So, but the commercial part of that is really how you, transfer or transform technology into something that can be used by the industry, by sectors, by the public sector. So it's commercialization of technologies potentially could have been developed by public sector funded research. So like in the States, where it could have been funded by NIH or NASA, or here in Australia, be funded by ARC or the other NHMRC or the other university funding and research funding that's provided by Commonwealth and by the state. So yeah.
Thank you for that. For Jerome also, could you share also your journey to becoming a commercial lawyer and leading up to your role right now? Thank you.
Thanks, Dianne, and thanks, Celia. It's always really fantastic to hear from people like Celia, who have such an incredibly impressive CV that when you come on second, you certainly feel completely underqualified coming in after that. But it's also fantastic to see such great talent in the legal and in the commercial space here in Australia. So acknowledging Celia and the fantastic work that she does, but also acknowledging you, Dianne. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's very exciting to be part of this community that FALAW is building, and it's actually really great that there is this network of Filipino Australian lawyers that really wasn't around when I was starting out. And maybe if I kind of rewind and reflect on my own journey, that was part of, I think, the issue that I had when I was first navigating my early career as a lawyer, in the sense that I didn't necessarily have many other Filipinos who were navigating the same journey as me, who was in law, let alone in commercial law, let alone in top tier commercial law. And so it was quite a journey to kind of get to where I was. But that said, my journey to becoming a commercial lawyer really started in much the same way that a lot of other first generation migrants started here in Australia. I came from a very large Filipino family, good Catholic family, had 5 kids, so there was never a dull moment in our household. But my family sold everything that they had to come to Australia. And my family didn't at all have any privilege or connections, particularly in the professional setting. But I did have one really important privilege, and that was to have parents who really instilled in me the values that have really stayed with me my entire legal journey. And these are really important Filipino values, like pagsisikap, the value of hard work and believing in a future that you can't see, tiyaga, grit, resilience, perseverance. Pakikisama was a really big thing around how do you have effective teamwork and work with others. And humility was a really big thing, not going in it thinking that you have all of the answers, but really being curious and to really learn. And so, I navigated my journey and I finished high school without getting the marks to get into law school. But I put my mind to it because I really wanted to be a lawyer. What really inspired me was when I was younger, I did a lot of public speaking and advocacy, and I really enjoyed communicating and conveying a viewpoint and convincing and persuading others about my view. And so I worked really, really hard and got into law school, which was one of the best days of my life in terms of working towards that and finally getting there. But then once you got there, it was a whole other struggle in terms of doing well in law. The expectations of you, there are very high standards. It's very competitive, as we all know, in terms of law school. And a lot of my friends didn't necessarily want to get into commercial law. They were interested in other areas of law, like family law or plaintiff injury law or working in government. But my desire was very much to work somewhere that I was going to be pushed and work on the most complex transactions, to really challenge myself and to see how far I can grow. And I was told that you should aim to try and get a seasonal clerkship at a top tier law firm at the time. And so that's what I set my mind to. And so I started my journey out as a graduate at King & Wood Mallisons, Mallison Stephen Jakes as it then was, a large leading law firm here in Australia, and I did my rotations in transactional practices as well as in disputes practices. But I very much settled on real estate and development work. And the reason why I fell in love with real estate and development work is just how tangible it is in terms of real estate law. We all know what it feels like to be in a space that changes your whole experience of the built form. So I was very, very much taken by working with developers to build, whether it's a premium office building or a new 5-star hotel, or working on a big port, for example, or an infrastructure project. So I was very much taken by that transactional work. And then I found myself moving to the firm that I'm currently at, Clayton Utz, because the partner that I was working with at the time moved across to this firm. And I've stayed at Clayton Utz for over a decade and have built my practice here, and very fortunate to work with clients who are really leading in the sectors in which they operate in terms of transactions and projects. So no 2 days are ever the same, but that's how I came to be working as a partner at Clayton Utz.
Yes, thank you for that, Jerome. And I think one of the themes also that I've learned about being a Filipino is called kapwa. And I think that I would add on to one of the themes that you just said, right?
Absolutely.
Looking forward to one of the questions. In FALAW, we also aim to highlight our diverse experiences, as Jerome already shared his, of our members of our legal community. So could Celia and Jerome also, probably adding on to what Jerome could add right now or before, about what are the poignant cultural diversity experiences and challenges you experience while navigating a career in commercial law here in Australia?
Oh, here in Australia. Actually, it's very interesting that you pointed out as well those Filipino values and how important they are, right? And I think it's one of the interesting cultural differences or challenges that one comes up with is here in the Philippines, of course, we're very hierarchical. It's very, very much about, like calling ate and kuya and sir and mom and tito and tita for older ones. And even in government, but even in the private sector, even in universities, there are channels that you go through to communicate. So sometimes you've seen a memo to so-and-so, and it says through channels, which means that it would have been vetted by succeeding layers of hierarchy before it got to the addressee, especially if the addressee is someone more senior than the one sending it. They're sometimes if they're peers, but they're two parts of an organization, through channels might mean that we'll still have to go through certain channels before those two peers might interact with each other. So that's very different from the way Australia works, of course. In my case, because I did my PhD in the States, I was already very familiar with the American way of, not using sir or ma'am or just calling each other by our first names. So it wasn't as much a cultural shock for me as it would have if I had come straight, I guess, from an entirely Philippine background. But that translates itself, the respect and the hierarchical system in the Philippines. That translates itself as well to very key ways of dealing with people, right? So it's not just a matter of protocol or red tape. It actually also affects how you actually interact. So for many people, because they're very used to that hierarchy, maybe is that they also might be less likely to speak openly, or to be quite blunt or direct with their feedback or their thoughts, because they're thinking, I'm speaking to someone much more senior than I am. Maybe I should soften my opinions, and of course, as women, we have that intersectional flavor as well, where we're women, we're from a multicultural background, and so we further soften our opinions so that we're not coming across as too assertive, which might be negatively looked at. And I don't believe in that, by the way. I think you will realize I do tend to be very straight and blunt, because I don't necessarily feel that helps us, especially multicultural women. It really very much works against us if we're in a culture that doesn't necessarily put value in that. In the Philippines, it might have helped us because that was part of the culture. But I think it's very important to recognize that when you're dealing in a different culture, then you need to adjust the way you work. And I and I'm very conscious of this when I'm negotiating as well with cross-border companies. So I've negotiated, prior to my current role, which are not the primes or not the big companies, but we're also all still actually very big, but we're not as big as Boeing and Lockheed Martins and Raytheons of the world. But when I was working even in Boeing and Leidos and these big American multinational companies and negotiating with other Fortune 100, Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies around the world, I was very conscious that as an intersectional, multicultural migrant woman, I had to put myself in a persona where I could negotiate on equal terms with all these other lawyers from around the world. And I would often be in a Zoom call or in a in-person meeting. I would often be the only woman. And if I'm not the only woman, I'm the only one who isn't, white. So there's always that level where if I'm the odd person out, how then, and I'm short, for those of you who remember how short I am, right? I'm this tiny Asian woman walking into a room with all these 6-footer men. How then do I assert myself? Because in a commercial negotiation, sometimes it can boil down to the first 2 minutes, right? If you're, right? So it's really very important. So I think the cultural aspect of it, of coming from the Philippines with that hierarchical, very respectful, non-confrontational, even conflict avoidance type of personality, and we have to be acutely aware of how we're using that to our advantage or not using it to our advantage when we're in a cross-border, a multicultural, multi-country, multinational negotiation or transaction.
Thank you for that, Celia. And could Jerome, if you could add into that, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many points that Celia was making that really resonated with me in terms of the challenges and particularly, talking about the intersectionality and those various issues. They do compound, and that emotional intelligence and cultural fluency is so important in terms of being able to navigate and do really well in the commercial space. But I have a few additional kind of takes on what Celia said. In the previous question, I touched on the Filipino values that were really helpful for me. But when I was navigating my early career, and if I can have license to speak honestly and freely, it was actually really difficult in terms of navigating these cultural challenges because, for example, I spoke about not necessarily having many other Filipino leaders who I could look to as role models in this space. They were there kind of in pockets, but not necessarily in commercial law. So trying to find somebody that I could model in an authentic way was a bit hard because there weren't many other Filipino leaders that I could see in this space. And thankfully that is changing because this group, for example, really has brought together so many amazing leaders in various different spaces. So that's a good sign as to where it's going. But there was also things like cultural misunderstandings. Like if you think about the Filipino values, my parents would often tell me to, don't stand out, put your head down, work hard, and you'll get rewarded for it. And in those very earlier years of my career, that was quite challenging because in our Australian kind of context, being able to identify your strengths and your points of opportunity and being able to advocate for yourself and be assertive in your journey so that you can, garner sponsors who are going to, in those really important forums where you're not there, really champion you to progress your cause. And that's all the harder when you don't necessarily have trusted confidants who you can turn to and say, how do I do that? And so it was a lot of trial and error. And look, frankly, in those very earlier years, it was just picking yourself off the ground and saying, I made a fool of myself in that negotiation, or I said something really silly to that senior partner, but I'm not going to let that get to me. I'm going to draw the line in the sand and keep going and learn from that experience and, figure out what worked and what didn't work and then change it. So if I'm going to be really honest, I think in those very early years, I tried very hard not to focus on my Filipino-ness and to instead focus on objective things that I could work on to become a really exceptional lawyer. But as I developed, I noticed that people were starting to look to me as a bit more of a role model. They would say, what did you do in this situation? And how do I navigate this? And I think that's the point where I was like, I'm not going to shy away from where I've come from and who I am. I am Filipino, and that is my background. And I'm going to use the platform that I have to help others, and to share my own journey in case it's helpful to other people navigating that journey. So I've been really fortunate to speak to people like you and present on panels and speak to university students and mentor a lot of different people to be able to unpack these things, these taboos that people often don't talk about, so that people can understand them a bit better and then equip themselves to deal with these situations better. And I think maybe the final point that I would make, because you ask about a poignant situation in my career, I think what really stood out to me was when I was asked to present my case for partnership to the board of partners, and they gave me an opportunity to really tell them my story and where I came from. And front and center to that was letting them know where I had come from, and how my history and my journey has shaped me to become the lawyer that I am, and how that makes me all the richer in terms of my contribution to the firm, in terms of leadership and in terms of our strategic objectives as a commercial law firm. And that was a real privilege to be able to share that, to not necessarily shy away from it, but actually have it front and center, that this is who I am and this is what makes me the lawyer that I am today. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, Jerome. And I congratulate you, because you're saying, if you didn't have any role models during your time, but now you are the role model for all the lawyers who are coming up, and seeing a partner in Clayton Utz is a Filipino. So I think, it's amazing that you've done that, and now you are that person who was missing in your own career journey. So I congratulate you, and I'm really glad that you're leaning in as well to very different, because when I mentor other professionals, and I've mentored quite a few lawyers and accountants from the Philippines, from Colombia, from Afghanistan, and I always try to tell them, you need to lean into what makes you different, because and we're fortunate in Australia actually that the industry, the legal industry and professional industry, does tend to appreciate diversity in thinking. And that includes, our diverse backgrounds, whether it be cultural, religious, gender. It's really great. I mean, I'm so glad for you, and I congratulate you as well for being that person now that other people can look up to, and you be there for them.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Dianne. Yeah.
I think also from our last conversation before, and from reflecting back from that period of time, I think what I've learned is that from what you said, from your stories, is that vulnerability and our difference are our strength. And I think that was something that I remember since the conversation. So thank you for sharing me those stories, and I remember until now.
Yeah. And I think this community of building each other up and helping each other is so important. Like now that I am in touch with a lot of other Filipinos, like, some of them are barristers, some of them are in government, some of them are in corporate like Celia, they have such great insights to share. And, we strengthen each other and help build each other up, knowing that there's a community of people that we walk alongside with. So thank you for all your support. That's really encouraging.
As a final part of this section, could you share from your experiences any advice for law students or professionals wanting to enter the commercial legal space, and also if they want to engage in any business advocacies on that end? Thank you. If Jerome could start on this time.
Yeah, sure. I might try and keep them reasonably short and punchy. So I think really get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So embrace resilience and embrace grit. There will be many a times where you feel like you've fallen, but you're picking that skill of picking yourself up and finding the energy to keep going, and finding the people who are going to support you to do that is really important. I'd also say be curious and never stop learning. There's so many things to learn in so many different areas, and following your passion and following your curiosity really allows you to develop a niche and develop an expertise that is of value to the commercial sector. I'd also say don't be afraid to dream very, very big, but be prepared to work damn hard to make your dream a reality, because nothing that's worthwhile achieving is easily built, and it takes time. So if you don't necessarily see it happening in 6 months to 1 year, give it time, and keep persevering, and be intentional about your career. I mentor and talk to a lot of more junior lawyers, and they're saying, I'm waiting for this opportunity to come up. I'm waiting for my partner to do this. But what I encourage people to think about is that your sphere of influence and control is much wider than you actually might think. So take control and ownership of your career, and guide it in the extent that you can, and seek out mentors and sponsors who are really going to help you along that journey. So there'd be a few kind of tips that I'd give to younger law students.
Thank you for that, Jerome. If Celia could add into that also, thank you.
I'm not sure I can add anything else. Jerome really covered the really big rocks, and I'm so glad that you did, actually, Jerome. It's really, really good. Maybe what I might add would be a bit more on the practical side of what they could potentially look at. I think, as you were saying, Jerome, always be open to learning and be intentional about your career. So I would suggest as well that if commercial law is really their interest, is to really lean into it as well, and get as much experience and exposure, maybe not necessarily job experience, but at least exposure to what commercial law means. When young lawyers start thinking about what they're interested in, sometimes that might be coming from a place where it's theoretical, or it's something they saw in the movies, or they think they want to go into corporate commercial law because they love suits. It's something that, to broaden and deepen their exposure in some way by connecting with mentors, volunteering maybe for some, even for some not-for-profits that actually are in the commercial space, and really getting it so that they understand better whether this is really what they want, and or if they don't want it, maybe to see what else that they might want to do. But in terms of the commercial space as well, and again, this is just from the more practical side of it, is it's also really good to understand sort of the business side of it, or what makes something commercial law. I mean, Jerome was talking about real estate and real property as being very tangible. I was saying, ironically, I've always done intellectual property, which is very intangible, but at the same time, it's IP in very tangible things, right? Like in airplanes and engines, and in previous life on DNA, which is tangible, but not quite at the molecular level. But it's but understanding that from a sort of broader perspective of what that might mean, what does intellectual property mean? What does real estate? What does real property mean? What do M&As actually mean in real life? Like when you see a company or see a news report saying, there's a merger happening, there's an acquisition happening. For example, the group that I'm head of legal of, we're equity funded, we're private equity funded. So what does that mean when you're private equity funded? So if they can, going back to what Jerome said, stay curious, stay open, that growth mindset, keep learning. And when you see something on the news, hear something on the news, or read a book even, or read something, even in a novel where they mention something, stay curious about it, because you never know, that actually might be something that is affected by commercial law. And it deepens your interest.
Yeah, those are actually really good practical tips. I think the one that really resonated with me was around building exposure, because when you get those opportunities build experience builds a CV, and then a CV builds a case for promotion and progression in your career, and so it kind of snowballs. And as you build that exposure and that experience, you also start to get a good sense of thinking commercially. Celia kind of talked about really important things that you keep in mind. But I remember when I was starting out as a law student and then as a law graduate, like, I didn't know what M&A was. I have a certain idea as to what IP is, but really don't have a full appreciation of it. But being curious, as Celia talked about, to learn more, and then get those opportunities, and once you build them, you start to develop, actually now I understand what these transactions are, and really aware of all the commercial realities, and you'll be really satisfied when you reflect back on that sort of journey.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerome and Celia, for that. And I think consolidating your experiences is a good segue to our next section about talking more about the cross-border commercial legal work for this podcast series and a podcast episode.
I really like what you said, Dianne, about our heritage being our strong, a strong value and strong, asset that we have as Filipinos.